What if everything you believed about this story was a lie? Stay with us as we unravel the shocking truth that changes everything. Although John was shot multiple times, the phone in his chest blocked the fatal blow. With his will to survive, John managed to wait for Rip to arrive. Meanwhile, Keith's office was attacked. But being a former soldier, a few assassins were no match for him. He didn't forget to tell Monica to take their son and seek refuge in the shed. After suiting up, Keith received a call from Rip. Upon hearing about his father's attack, Keith first arranged for a helicopter to pick up his severely injured father, then organized the arriving police to help surround the truck that attacked his father. The revenge battle was about to begin. On the other side, Monica was rushing toward the shed with Tate when they ran straight into the assassins. In a critical moment, Monica ran out of the cabin and realized that the farm was in complete chaos. By this time, John had already been picked up by the helicopter and was on his way to the nearest hospital. With Keith's relentless pursuit, they spotted the fleeing truck at an intersection, slamming on the gas. He jumped out of the car with his gun drawn, without a word. Surrounded by the police, the criminals were almost completely wiped out. The last one tried to carjack and escaped. Thus, all the attackers who went after John were eliminated. Keith, however, was injured and collapsed. Meanwhile, Beth received a bomb package. Beth ultimately survived, but she was seriously injured. Even bystanders were trembling in fear, but Beth's eyes burned with anger and hatred. The Yellowstone Ranch was about to launch a relentless revenge. The scene then shifted to John, who woke up after 2 months in a coma. Under the escort of several police cars, John safely arrived at the ranch and saw Keith, who had been protecting it all along. Through Keith, he learned the details of the events. But as long as the mastermind remained unknown, the Yellowstone Ranch would never know peace. Although they had no concrete leads, Beth was certain that Jamie was behind everything. Beth had always had issues with her brother Jamie, and the roots of their conflict went back to their childhood. Beth got pregnant after having an affair with young Rip. She turned to Jamie for help, but despite knowing that the clinic's abortion conditions required sterilization, Jamie still took her there, resulting in Beth being unable to have children for life. Since then, Jamie had appeared weak and irresponsible in Beth's eyes. And now, with a series of tragic events happening to the Yellowstone family, Jamie hadn't even bothered to make a single phone call to check on them. I'm going to it myself. Think hard about what you're saying, Beth, and track it. On the other side, inside the Indian tribal casino, a scruffy gambler made rude remarks to a beautiful dealer, even boasting that he had shot John a few days ago. You saying you shot John, but I'm just a party by anybody. What I do is what I do. At that moment, Mo was watching from behind the surveillance camera and saw everything clearly. It didn't take long for Mo to locate the gambler. However, the chief thought the gambler was just a loudmouth, a typical bragger he had seen many times before. Drug dealers don't gamble odds like this. These are winnings. The chief immediately told Mo to investigate further, since they were also deeply entangled in this conflict. Late at night, Mo took the gambler to the outskirts. The gambler didn't hold back on his insults. My heart was filled, too wet. Hell, it's all. Then Mo began to help the gambler regain his memories. Who were you, lad? When you die, I take the war to your family. Think about your family. After some threats and persuasion, the gambler finally revealed the identity of the mastermind. Although Yellowstone Ranch didn't know who the enemy was, Rip had his own methods for finding out. His approach was simple. Better to kill 1,000 innocents than let one guilty person slip away. How are you doing? The fisherman stumbled into the woods, but in the end he couldn't make it. He foamed at the mouth and died on the spot. While it wasn't certain whether the attack on Yellowstone was connected to the hotel management company, the fisherman certainly wasn't a good person. The burly man, however, was Rip from Yellowstone Ranch. If anyone was loyal to Yellowstone, it was Rip. Rip had another unique trait. He didn't have legal status. Young Rip who had woken up from a coma, discovered that his brother was already dead. Outside there was a commotion. His drunken father was abusing his mother. Rip killed his father with his own hands and then hid in a barn, where John, who worked for the livestock committee, found him. Seeing Rip covered in blood, John immediately thought of the horrific incident that had occurred in town just days earlier. Just kill that motherfucker years ago. What's your name? Rip. John told him that in order to survive, he had to prove himself. Fast forward to the present. Beth encountered a little boy outside the hospital. The boy looked remarkably like Rip from 20 years ago. That night, Beth told Rip she had a surprise for him. Who the fuck are you? My name's Lord. Shut up. It turned out that Beth, who couldn't have children, had decided to adopt the boy, but Rip couldn't accept it at first. He shoved the boy into the warehouse and planned to send him away early the next morning. The next day, the boy, who knew his future was hopeless, grumbled the entire way. Eventually, Rip couldn't take it anymore and threw him out on the side of the road. As the car drove away, Rip glanced at the boy in the rearview mirror. For a moment, it was as if he saw himself from 20 years ago. Back then, it was John who had given him a chance. Now Rip wanted to give the boy a chance too. But, like a job. Rip brought the boy back to the ranch and had him start working by cleaning the stables. Meanwhile, John finally uncovered the truth. The group that attacked them was the same mercenary group that had previously kidnapped his grandson, Tate. Now, they could settle both the old and new scores at once. Although they still didn't know who was behind it all, they operated on the principle of getting revenge on anyone who wronged them. This time, they completely wiped out the mercenary group. The next day, the chief gave old John a special gift and handed him the information about the mastermind behind it all. But John didn't recognize the name. Strangely enough, the person was still serving time in prison. From what the gambler said, there might be someone else pulling the strings behind him. That night, John took the gambler to the Yellowstone train station. However, instead of sending him off with a bullet, he chose to settle things the old cowboy way, with a duel. Hank was brutally killed, and the head of the hotel company came in to handle the situation. The head, Mary, was all business. She recognized Beth's abilities in the capital market and invited her to manage the hotel company's local market operations. However, this collaboration had nothing to do with Yellowstone land. She would continue to acquire land from Yellowstone unless Beth could find a better solution or help them find even better land. Beth accepted the offer, but she had one condition: to gain actual control of Bob's company. Doing a bankrupting first. Waste fucking grandchildren on lawfare. The next day, Beth stormed into Bob's office. You are fired. You're fired too, nosy bitch. Moving to my car. On the other side, John gave Keith the information about the bald man. He told Keith to go find Jamie and use his position as the district attorney to get more detailed information on the bald man. If Jamie didn't cooperate, it would confirm Beth's suspicions. However, Keith didn't believe the bald man could have been working for Jamie. He felt that Beth's prejudice against Jamie was too strong. Still, Keith went to see Jamie and directly told him that the Dutton family needed his help. Without hesitation, Jamie agreed. As a member of the Yellowstone family, he would see it through to the end. Through this conversation, Keith also asked Jamie why, during such a critical time for the family, Jamie had disappeared without a trace and hadn't even bothered to make a phone call. Jamie explained that ever since the Yellowstone ranch had been attacked, he had been working behind the scenes to protect it. The attack, Keith's destruction of the mercenary group, Rip's assassination of Hank, none of these things were legally sanctioned. These were all actions that Jamie had been secretly helping with. As for why he hadn't contacted the family, it was to avoid suspicion. This was also why, after the incident, he had told Rip to cut off all contact with him. With this, Keith finally cleared his doubts about Jamie. I love you, brother. I love you. But things were far from simple. When Jamie received the information about the bald man, he saw a familiar name on the list of inmates. Jamie knew that his biological father's greatest wish was for him to completely break free from old John and inherit the Yellowstone ranch. Meanwhile, Beth noticed a young girl had appeared in the house. The fuck are you? This is my daughter. Put it down. She's a guest in our house. The time rewinds to the morning of the previous day. Keith had just arrived at his office when he was confronted by a large group of protesters gathered outside. Keith first called his colleagues for backup and then attempted to go into the office. However, the protesters were clearly riled up, and Keith had no choice but to draw his gun and issue a warning. This, however, played right into the protesters' hands. They wanted to provoke the authorities, snap photos, and create a media frenzy. Keith had no idea how to handle such a situation, So he called his father, Old John, for help. John met with the protest leader to understand the situation. Arming and the mass murder of millions of animals every year. These were just a bunch of hot-headed young people. John then told the sheriff to go ahead and press charges. If this had been in the past, John would have used his resources to ensure that the protest leader spent some time behind bars. But with all that had happened to Yellowstone recently, John had changed. He decided to bail the girl out and invited her to visit his ranch, hoping she might change her view of the local farm. As the day passed, they toured the ranch, and by night, they were in each other's arms. Beth told her father about her new role at the hotel company. However, when Beth attended an internal meeting at the hotel company, she discovered that the company's plans were much more extensive than just an airport and ski resort. The project had Phase 2 and 3 as well. Once completed, the current Yellowstone Ranch would be transformed into a full-fledged city. This ambitious project was already beyond the ranch and her control. By chance, Beth encountered environmental protesters on her way back. An idea quickly formed in her mind. She shared the hotel company's project plans with Linda. This project would undoubtedly cause catastrophic damage to the already fragile local ecosystem. As expected, the environmental group immediately appeared at the project site, trying to organize the construction. The company held an emergency meeting since the project's timeline couldn't afford any delays. Beth suggested kicking the journalists off the site and having the police arrest the protesters that evening. Mary agreed to Beth's proposal, and Beth volunteered to handle the journalists herself. However, when Beth arrived at the site, she personally requested the contact information of one of the journalists. Why would you do that? Horses for... That night, outside the environmental group's camp, a large number of police officers appeared, as anticipated. Since there were no journalists present, the police had free rein to arrest the environmentalists without interference. The next morning, it was clear that everything had been secretly orchestrated by Beth. Her goal was to delay the project's progress. Using his position as the district attorney, Jamie was able to meet with the bald man in prison. Through his immunity, he extracted the true mastermind behind the attack on Yellowstone Ranch. As suspected, it was Jamie's biological father. On one side was John, the man who had raised him for 30 years, and on the other side was his biological father. Jamie was deeply conflicted, but his biological father didn't hesitate to admit everything and even gave Jamie a gift. You did it. Got away from him. You did everything. Whoa, meet your son. The following day, Jamie stood outside with a determined look. Today, he was going to kill his biological father to avenge his adoptive father. The previous day, due to the unexpected appearance of his girlfriend, Jamie hadn't had the chance to confront his biological father directly. After a night of struggle, he had made up his mind. I'll stand up and turn the hurrah! However, Jamie had overestimated himself. Faced with the father who had never raised him, Jamie ultimately couldn't bring himself to do it. His biological father took the opportunity to brainwash him, claiming that John never truly loved him and had only used him to protect Yellowstone's land. This idea coincidentally aligned with what Jamie had always believed. Sure enough, under his biological father's persuasion, Jamie finally returned to his embrace. Now, Jamie not only had a happy family, but, with his girlfriend and father's encouragement, he was also running for governor, aiming to become the most powerful person in Montana. That day, the female governor approached John, announcing her intention to run for Congress and take the next step in her career. This meant that the governor's seat would be vacated, and she planned to endorse Jamie for the position. Although John believed that Jamie could not have orchestrated the attack on the farm, he also recognized that his son was weak and selfish. Giving him too much power would not be good for the ranch, but John didn't have any suitable candidates to recommend. In the end, he made the decision to run for governor himself. When Beth learned that her father was running for governor, she knew this would change everything. If old John succeeded in the election, he could reject the hotel company's investment, drive them out of Montana, and ruin the family traitor, Jamie. The next day, Jamie's assistant informed him that there was an impromptu press conference he needed to attend. Jamie knew that the governor might announce his candidacy. He was excited, but as he was about to head downstairs, he saw John in a formal suit. Jamie was at a loss. Given everything that had happened in the family, he had never even bothered to make a phone call. But that wasn't the real issue. He thought that once he became governor, all the awkwardness would disappear. However, when the governor announced the chosen candidate, Jamie was completely stunned. John, when John returned home, he received a call from the county prison. It turned out that Linda from the environmental organization had been sentenced to life imprisonment after assaulting a police officer during the protest, in addition to several similar previous offenses. Although John had shared a deeper connection with Linda, he naturally didn't want to get involved in this situation.
He's the one who told me to protest here. Which was best I did.
Look at you out of this. It was then that John learned that it was Beth who had instigated Linda to protest. John was furious. He yelled at Beth, knowing full well that he wasn't a kind-hearted man, but he had a principle of not harming innocent people. Beth's underhanded methods had crossed the line, and this time John decided to use his resources to help Linda reduce her sentence. She would only need to serve 8 months in prison. Soon after, John and Rip encountered an unexpected incident at a restaurant.
You got the truck. Had a pistol in my glove box. Got a rifle behind the seat. That. It's around the corner.
Yeah.
Oh my God, John.
Meanwhile, the news reported a robbery at the restaurant, and John was hailed as a hero. This event quickly spread throughout Montana, and John's approval rating soared. Jamie wasn't happy about this. John's influence was already deeply rooted, and now Jamie had no chance at all. Fortunately, his girlfriend comforted him and suggested a good idea. She proposed that Jamie be portrayed as a son who gave up wealth and status to reunite with his impoverished, estranged father, a devoted and filial figure. If Jamie didn't take this approach, he might still have a chance. But if he adopted this persona, not only would he lose the governorship, but he might even be forced to resign as district attorney. His girlfriend, now fully aware that Jamie's father had killed his mother, was shocked. Immediately, she suggested a plan B.
Is to put as much distance between you and him as you can.
At this point, Jamie's father did genuinely care about him, and he had already left the farm. One day, John went to a cafe and turned around to find Jamie's biological father in the corner. John finally understood everything, and he made his stance clear.
This Salisbury steak in Montana, you enjoy, 'cause you never know which meal will be your last.
Although John had figured out the mastermind behind everything, Beth was still in the dark. A cowboy who had served time told her that prisoners had the right to spend quality time with their wives.
Reckon they wouldn't be too concerned about you.
Beth decided to infiltrate the prison and force the bald man to reveal the true mastermind. Through the bald man, Beth learned that Jamie had also come to him to clear up the truth. Beth then stormed into Jamie's office with a gun, and under her threat, Jamie finally confessed the truth. Beth gave Jamie two choices. The first was to tell the governor about everything, and have the police arrest both Jamie and his biological father. The second was to tell Rip, who would kill Jamie's biological father, and she would also reveal to Rip that Jamie was the reason she could no longer have children. Both choices were equally deadly for Jamie. He immediately dropped to his knees and begged Beth,
"Please, please."
Beth then offered Jamie a third choice. Back at home, Jamie's biological father, not wanting to affect Jamie's campaign, decided to leave Montana. Before he left, he encouraged his son not to fear the Dutton family. That night, Jamie dragged his father's body to the Yellowstone train station.
You should have picked options 1 or 2.
Beth captured the scene on camera. Now she had Jamie in her grasp. At Yellowstone Ranch, John was visibly concerned. Although Jamie had betrayed him, he was still the child John had raised for 30 years. In John's heart, Jamie had long become his own flesh and blood. Now that you know the truth, what would you have done differently? Let us know in the comments below, and prepare for more stories that'll keep you guessing.